Dear friends, grace, mercy, and peace be with you from God our Creator and from Jesus the Christ, who pushes on us, who challenges us and comforts us at the same time. Amen. Many years ago, I played football, high school football, with the editorial page editor of the Star Tribune, Scott Gillespie, who also happens to belong to the Lutheran church that my dad and siblings are part of in St. Paul. Our school mascot was the most, and it still is, I'm so embarrassed, the most awful, racist, politically insensitive mascot in the universe, but that can be a topic for another sermon. I don't know if Scott wrote the editorial in Thursday's paper. Apparently they take turns, the primary writer. But it did make me laugh. Here's part of it. Remember when we were tougher? Bud Grant roamed the sidelines in an outdoor stadium with nary a heater in sight. Kids bundled up in scratchy layers of wool and walked to school without complaint. Dogs didn't wear sweaters. It's all different now. We've got North Face jackets, bun-warming car seats, and a statewide obsession with wind chill, whatever that is. We used to take pride in our ability to endure. Now we close schools, work at home, and warn about the dangers of exposed flesh, black ice, and something called the polar vortex. And it did make me think also of what Yahweh says to Jeremiah, who is called to be a prophet. God is trying to toughen Jeremiah up at the same time that God is giving Jeremiah a pep talk and commissioning him to speak in behalf of God. If we read on following today's more gentle reading, or at least beyond the last part of our reading, which is not so gentle, there is this. But you, Jeremiah, gird up your loins, stand up and tell them everything that I command you. Do not break down before them, or I will break you before them. And I, for my part, have made you today a fortified city, an iron pillar and a bronze wall against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, its princes, its priests, and the people of the land. In other words, be brave, and you got this. Anything worth doing is going to come with some pushback or something much worse. So toughen up. Then there's the gospel. Jesus has the worshipers in the palm of his hand. They are amazed at his gracious words. This would have been the time for Jesus to take a seat. But no, he keeps on talking. Imagine someone responding, Jesus, you had me until you started putting words in my mouth. I was really impressed until you accused me of accusing you, even though I hadn't accused you of anything. You had me. I was right there with you until you said that a prophet is not welcome in his hometown. What's wrong with us? We're your people. And why are you talking about lepers and Naaman and others who are not part of our group? Perhaps we are all a little bit surprised with the approach Jesus takes with his own people in Nazareth, or maybe we're surprised by their reactions. Why does Jesus put them on the defensive? We quickly see Jesus as a comforter of the afflicted and an afflictor of the comfortable. But were those folks sitting in that backwater small town of Nazareth really all that comfortable? There is reason to be conflicted about what's happening in this story. Those of you who grew up in more conservative communities can perhaps remember coming home from college or somewhere and making a bold declaration about something that you had come to believe, perhaps while sitting around the dinner table make a bold declaration about some new idea or insight that you had come upon. And as you share, suddenly the family that has been gushing over all of your accomplishments is now questioning your good sense. For me, this would have been at the dinner table of my dear wife's family, which didn't speak about controversial issues at the table or anywhere. So when I, as a very enlightened, of course, college student, stated my opinion about how to lessen gun violence, their eyes all turned not to me, but to their daughter, and they glared as if to say, "Where did you find him? Get him out of here." Thankfully, there was not a cliff. Just a room with no heat in the middle of winter. True story, they tried to freeze me out. So maybe we can relate to Jesus a little bit, who raises the temperature in his hometown. Jesus is focused on his mission, and he's not going to be swayed, and he's not going to soften his message even for his family and friends. Could it be that Jesus keeps talking because the good people of Nazareth didn't actually hear what he said at the beginning? This is a speech, remember, that started last week. Did they hear the radical words of Jesus, the declaration of his Spirit-endowed mission, borrowed from Isaiah, but fully his own, that he would proclaim good news to the poor, recovery of sight to the blind, release to the captives, and the year of the Lord? The year of the Lord. That is forgiveness of all debt and the return of land to its original inhabitants. Maybe he saw the looks on their faces that they were just listening to an old text without really making the connection. It seems that the people would prefer that their beloved native child would just stick to the reading of the biblical texts without applying them to the reign of God and the new thing that was happening. One of the questions that we ask of a biblical text is, where are we in the story? Of course, with this story from Luke, our first inclination is to be in the audience, listening as if for the first time. In Jeremiah, we may find ourselves in the young prophet's shoes, as those who need to be encouraged to step outside of our comfort zone, even prodded to toughen up. Imagine being told, "Gird up your loins. Do not break down before them, or I will break you before them." It's almost like, toughen up. Don't cry. Don't you cry. Because if you do, I will make you really cry. We can't imagine such a thing being said these days, even though some of us perhaps have heard that in the past. A challenge to endure is one thing. A threat is another. So it's not so much toughen up, but be strong. There will come times when those called to speak out will need to be strong. This is not only true for activists, politicians, but for church people, neighbors, and citizens who accompany the vulnerable and who dare to speak truth to power. We actually have something in the reading from Jeremiah that we do not have specifically in the Gospel from Luke this week, and that is a clear promise on both sides of the challenging words that God speaks to Jeremiah. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you. And then later, I, for my part, have made you today a fortified city, an iron pillar, and a bronze wall. Being challenged, being comforted, is something that we as people of faith have come to expect. What we hope for, though, is not protection from anything that makes us uncomfortable, but rather the courage to stand up in the face of resistance, and the reminder of the promise that God abides with us always. Amen.